Hi everyone, my name is Markus Patberg. I'm a political theorist at the University of Hamburg, and in this video I would like to briefly present you my book Constituent Power in the European Union, published by Oxford University Press. What is the book about? The book deals with the democratic legitimacy of the European Union. This is a debate in political theory that traditionally revolves around the question of how the EU polity should ideally be organized. By contrast, I ask who is entitled to make that decision and how. And in order to provide an answer, I reformulate the classical notion of constituent power for the context of European integration. Now, the democratic meaning of the famous distinction between constituent and constituted powers comes to light in two key ideas. First, that only the people as constituent power have the right to establish public authorities. So constitutions should have a democratic origin. And second, constituted powers, so the government, the legislature, the courts, and so on, must not be involved in decisions about the constitution because they should not be able to decide on their own terms of operation. What relevance do these ideas have with regard to the European Union? The EU treaties are functionally equivalent to national constitutions in that they enable, regulate and restrict the exercise of public authority. So whoever decides on the EU's structure and competences is engaged in a form of constitutional politics. However, what happens in the context of European integration is that constituted powers operate as de facto constituent powers. There are two main mechanisms of EU constitutional politics: intergovernmental treaty making and integration through law, which means that the EU polity is shaped by governments and courts. And this, I argue, amounts to a usurpation of constituent power. Now, this critique is not purely academic. As I show in the book, citizens have actually started to challenge the role of the states as the so-called masters of the treaties. A number of public narratives have emerged through which citizens are reclaiming constituent power vis-à-vis the EU. However, there's a lot of disagreement as to where constituent power actually lies and what follows from that. And so I reformulate these competing ideas as systematic models of constituent power, which I assess from the standpoint of democratic theory. The first model is the regional cosmopolitan one, which claims that constituent power lies with the political community of European citizens. By contrast, the second model, the democratic one, claims that actually the constituent power in the EU lies with the peoples of the member states. Then there's the third model, a dual model, or pouvoir constituant mixed, which pursues a middle course and claims that actually constituent power is held by the political community of EU citizens and the political communities of the member states simultaneously. And finally, there is the idea of destituent power, which attributes to a non-delineated multitude the right to dismantle constitutional structures in the EU. Now, based on a critique of these different models, I develop a new theory of constituent power in the EU to show how EU constitutional politics could become more democratic. At its core, this theory is a new version of the pouvoir constituant mixed, which claims that the EU's dual constituent power consists of citizens all the way down. So constituent power is held by individuals in two roles, in the roles of national and European citizens. And I make an institutional proposal for how this constituent power could be exercised. The idea is to transform the convention provided for by Article 48 of the Treaty on European Union into a permanent constitutional assembly. This assembly would be subject to certain constraints, so for example it could not question the sovereignty of the member states, but in general it would take on the exclusive competence to decide on issues of structuring the EU polity. The members would be directly elected, one half in national elections, the other half in European elections. In my view, such an institution would have a number of advantages as compared to how we currently decide on the EU treaties, and I'd like to mention just one. If we had directly elected representatives tasked to decide on the structure and competences of the EU, we would have regular electoral campaigns centered around the question of how we should determine or how we should structure the future of European integration. And I think we can expect that this would lead not only to greater responsiveness, but also to increased mobilization and to a real competition between alternatives. In short, a democratic politicization of EU constitutional politics. Finally, while all of this is meant as a contribution to political theory, I think it has relevance for current political events. So for example, the new theory of constituent power I'm offering can be used to critically examine the ongoing conference on the future of Europe, for instance by asking in whose name this conference is supposed to speak and why we should assume that it is legitimized to do so. And I raise some of these questions and provide first answers in the final chapter of the book. Let me conclude by thanking the editors of the Diritti Comparati blog for the invitation to contribute this presentation, which I hope has sparked your interest in the book.